We have quite a team of people, and I always hesitate in recognizing teams of people because I inevitably leave somebody out. But quite a team of people that make this possible, this moment, this recording. I'm here, obviously. Donna, my delightful partner, our indispensable office manager, Alicia, and then we have, goodness, a video editor and a producer of this show, a technical person, a internet person, internet marketing person, our IT person. It's a team of people that make this possible. It takes a lot to put out something that's free. More than you can imagine, which is why there's a place on the page that says donate if you feel like it. And no, I didn't intend to pitch that. But the point is, we've spent a great deal of time and resources preparing the extensive parenting training that's on realloveparents.com, the ridiculously effective parenting training, as well as making its availability known to people on the internet. It's one thing to have a life-changing product, but if you don't know how to get out there and bring it to people, so what? It dies. It's buried and nobody knows. In the process of doing this work, I've taken untold courses in internet marketing now, and I've had to learn to use keywords and phrases like long tail keywords and words that I never knew existed, to use them in writing blogs and landing pages and so on, so that people can find the material that will teach them how to love and teach their children. I know how to teach people how to do that. Learning how to market it has been quite a different experience. If I enter into Google the keywords that we're using, naturally I see articles and other materials, websites, that are available out there on parenting and all the subjects that have to do with parenting. It's actually been a bit horrifying because I was going to say hundreds of entries I've read, that's not close. Thousands of entries that I've read, thousands of websites that I visited. Now, hang on for this because I didn't put it together until yesterday. I haven't read a single mention of loving our children. So there's, how to stop them from using drugs and how to get them to stop whining and crying and how to treat their ADHD and blah, 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 blah. And they go on, and they offer drugs and techniques and treatment programs. And most common, are articles like the ones that I just saw moments ago on children who whine. Children whine only because, and of course they're all, the 5 steps to stop whining, the 7 steps, the 11 steps, the whatever it is. But see, children whine only because they're in emotional pain. That's the truth. That's a fact. That's not discussable. They're in emotional pain, so they whine. And yet all the articles, every one of them, teach techniques about how to stop the whining. But they don't address love at all. So they don't address the cause. That would be like people having cancer and the cancer is coming through the skin and having articles all over the internet of how to use makeup to cover up the cancer that's on your skin. You're kidding, but no, they're not kidding. And it's a little bit horrifying. So they're not addressing the cause. And I read endless articles entitled something like this, the 5 steps to stopping whining or depression or arguing or ADD or whatever. Here's the revelation. There are no 5 steps to deal with any of those problems. There are no 5 steps. Period. People try them, but without a foundation of loving, it just turns into more controlling and manipulating. And as a result, the children feel less loved when they're manipulated and controlled, and the behaviors actually worsen. So here are these techniques that we use to stop whining, for example, and we just make the kids whine more. I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal about how we could use our time well during this, call it whatever it is, shut-in time, stay-at-home time, lockdown, everybody has a different thing. The article was hysterical because it was making fun of actually all of these websites that say, well, make a schedule for your kids. And oh, the schedule is just gorgeous. An hour of this beautiful activity and an hour of this and an hour of learning this in school and an hour of exercise. And the schedule looked great for the first day. The second day, several lines were eliminated and just replaced with screen time. By the third day, it was almost all screen time. And by the fourth day, the entire schedule just said, I'll give you $100 if you go away. Because a schedule without knowing how to implement one is just annoying. It's a guarantee for disappointment, for failure. Perfect schedule, but you don't know how to execute it. The same is true with parenting. To teach techniques without the preparation, techniques of parenting, without the preparation of feeling loved ourselves as parents, which we talked about a great deal in Unit 13, the unit right before this one, would be like learning on the internet, going and watching a YouTube, for example, on how to pole vault without any preparation. Not the physical fitness, not the right equipment, not somebody there with us who knows, what we're supposed to be doing. Telling parents techniques to parent without the preparation be like teaching you how to pole vault without the preparation. All you're going to get is injured or dead. Any wonder then why children are angrier, more entitled, more addicted, more depressed, more suicidal? In one state, suicide is up 300%. 300% in just 9 years. No disease on earth, other than the present one, COVID-19, can brag about deadly statistics like that, if you can use the word deadly and brag in the same sentence. We're not loving and teaching our children. That's why they're getting more entitled and more depressed and more suicidal and more angry and more. And I hear from parents all over the world every single day. We have to be prepared. We have to do better. We do. We, the parents, not the kids. We say we care about our children. Every parent does. It's like a non-answer to give. And you say to a parent, do you love your children? Oh, yes, I love my children. But there's no evidence that they do, other than giving them things, giving them phones, giving them money, giving them cars. We say we do. And so my response now to parents is, prove it. And I don't say it with a snotty tone. It's just, I am hearing your words. I am not seeing any supporting action. So it's really, the question is not, do you love your children? It's, what are you doing to learn to love your children? That's the question. Now, in the last session of this Facebook Live, I emphasized the point that we can't give what we don't have, that we must find people to unconditionally love us before we could possibly be prepared to unconditionally love our children. That's like kind of duh. You can't give what you don't have. And I listed many, many ways to find that love. And during one of those expositions, I talked about how to start conversations with people when you just want to connect, because that is one of the first steps we have to take as parents if we're going to make the claim, I love my children, really. And I ask parents that sometimes when they ask me for parenting advice. And so they say, I'm starting the parenting training and I'm doing it. And at some point they say, and I do love my children. And I say, so who have you connected with in the last 2 days? I do, just like that. Because if they started the parenting training, then they know that we have to do that. And the answer is always, not joking, well, that's like asking your child if they did their homework. Well means no, I haven't done it. We have to connect with other people. And at the last of Unit 13, I described exactly what you can say to somebody when you call them up to connect with them when you don't know what to say. Well, it turns out that a woman wrote me, and she told me how she did a very unusual thing. She listened to Unit 13, really listened, and then she acted on it. Imagine that. Imagine hearing something and then going and actually doing it. All of the principles of real love work only if you do them. She said this, quote, I tried what you suggested today, meaning on the Unit 13. She says, I was feeling empty and I knew that although I could just power myself through it and get busy doing things and distract myself, it wasn't what I really needed. I remembered what you said on the Facebook Live, and I realized that I needed to feel some genuine connection. So I did what you said. And I called someone and I told them that I was feeling lonely and wanted to connect. That's all she said. I've been feeling a little alone today and I just called you because I want to connect. That is not a complicated sentence. That's the whole thing. One sentence. Now, back to the woman speaking to me. Quote, she says, speaking of the woman that she called, she was quite surprised at first because nobody calls us and says that. That's the problem. That's why we overall feel alone, is that nobody's doing this. Nobody's saying, I'm feeling a little alone. I don't feel deeply connected to other people. Would you be willing to try it with me? Nobody says that. No, instead we talk about our hair and the game that we last attended, which now has been a while since sports have been closed down. Things are really changing and kind of forcing us to look at ourselves. We don't connect very well. And the woman she called was surprised because we don't, because it was an unusual thing to hear. Now, I keep interrupting this woman. Now, back to what she said. She was quite surprised and at first didn't know what to say. Perfect. Because when you first call somebody and say, I've been feeling kind of alone and I just wanted to connect, it's very likely that the person on the other end is feeling a little alone and doesn't quite know how to connect either. Well, figure it out. This lady did. She continues. But we kept going. We just started talking. People say to me, about what? And I go, whatever's on your mind. Don't edit it. The best conversations you'll ever have with people when you're really trying to connect are where you don't think. Now, that just makes some people crazy. So I'm going to have a conversation where I'm not thinking. In fact, those are my favorite conversations. My conversations with Donna, I'm not thinking. When I have most conversations with people on Skype, I'm not thinking. I'm just vomiting whatever words come into my head. And it turns out those are the most honest ones. This lady continues. I keep interrupting her. She says, and we kept going, and it led to a nice conversation on a deeper level than we've ever experienced before, at least, with each other. Later, I texted her and said it felt good to connect for a few minutes. And she texted back saying the same. It really felt good. End quote. Is that cool or what? So she heard, if I'm going to be a better parent, then I need to learn to feel more connected to myself, or how am I going to love my children? She did it. It worked. And she followed an exceptionally simple formula. So can you. Wow. New subject. A man writes to me and he says, and no, I clear my throat a lot because I've had allergies since I was a little kid. I don't have COVID that I know of. He says, my 14-year-old son and I have had to make adjustments now that we're confined in the house all the time. We simply interact more because there's no place to go. So more potential conflicts come up. Yeah, unavoidable. He continues, I've been very fortunate that my son, Mark, has always enjoyed spending time with me. No kidding. That's pretty cool. It's evidence, proof, really, that you are loving him to a considerable extent. If your kids tend to avoid you, tend to always be going someplace else, and they don't just sit around talking to you, you can pretty much write it down that you don't know how to connect with them. So this man has benefited a lot from taking the ridiculously effective parenting training. He's changed a ton, which is one of the reasons that his son does like to be around him. And he's doing a great job. And he's been learning to do that better and better in the last year or so. It's been very impressive. He continues. One thing Mark does is to walk up to me, and no matter what I'm doing, this is what children do, reading, working, watching a show, he just starts talking as though he was the most important person in the world and I wasn't really doing something. That's what kids do. Most of the time, I'm happy to be interrupted. But one, sometimes I'm busy and need him to let me finish what I'm doing. And two, he has to learn somehow, probably from me, that he can't just interrupt everybody when he wants something. I feel like it's my job to teach him that. So I've been trying to help Mark to not interrupt me if I'm doing something, but instead to approach me and say, do you have a minute? This is brilliant. This is loving and teaching. I didn't tell this particular technique, because this is a technique. The loving is not a technique. Loving flows from the love you already feel. But he came up with this on his own. I've taught him to come up and say, do you have a minute? Which is thoughtful, beautiful teaching on the dad's part, learning on the son's part. It just works. Dad continues. I've told him that 9 times out of 10 that he wants my attention, I'll be able to talk, but sometimes I'll be busy. And he can't just assume I can break off from what I'm doing all the time. Brilliant solution. Now, to everybody who missed this part, notice that this father isn't solely concerned about being interrupted himself. He even says he'd drop anything to talk to his son. If he were thinking only of himself, he'd be trying to control his son and stop his interruptions. And children can smell when parents need to control them. This father wants to teach a principle that his son will find useful for the rest of his life. And that's lovely. That's teaching the course of life, which most of us were never taught. Oh, we got algebra and history and social studies and reading and everything else, but where was the how do you live with human beings? Nowhere. And yeah, I've used geometry a few times in my life, not very many, whereas learning how to live with other human beings I use every day. Dad continues. He admitted, the son, he admitted that he was selfish, and I told him, well, I still love you. And I said, we're just practicing to be better every day, be more loving, be happier, and this situation gives us a fantastic opportunity to learn. That's what Dad said to the son. This dad is really pretty amazing. I'm not being obsessive, compulsive, or controlling, am I? He was asking me by teaching his son this. You got to be kidding. No, he does. Your son does need to learn to perceive others' needs. That's a life skill. That's the course of life. And he needs to realize that with everybody and in every situation, he's not the center of the universe. Now, from moment to moment, he might be the center of your universe, and he loves that, but he can't assume that everywhere he goes, or he becomes pretty selfish. In fact, he might go all the way to narcissistic. So you taught him a nice skill. Nicely done. Now, to the rest of you. Notice that when a parent does something unproductive or unloving, and I've given you lots of examples in these Facebook Lives, I simply love and teach them. I don't become annoyed. I'm not impatient. I'm not disgusted. I don't go, oh, God, be kidding me. You're that stupid. No, just love and teach them, giving you an example of exactly how to love and teach your children. Same tone of voice. It's just information. I just teach parents what works better. If a parent does something well, I still love and teach. It's the same process. It works everywhere. If a parent does something well, I don't praise them. I don't say to this dad, for example, oh man, you're such a great father. No, just that's a really great solution to that. And it really worked, didn't it? It's information. I don't praise if done well. Don't criticize if a parent performs poorly. You just love and teach, which is what you'll be doing with your children. That's why I point that out. I'm doing with you what you're going to do with your kids in the same way. Now, every once in a while, I can't resist telling stories about my grandchildren. Not because they're my grandchildren, but because they're the beginning of an upcoming generation of children raised with unconditional love, with real love, from birth. That's why I tell the stories. It's taken a lot of years to create such children because it takes generations. I didn't even figure out what real love was, and certainly didn't know how to implement it well until my own children were in their early late teens. That's when I began to learn. But they did learn real love well enough to raise their children to feel loved and taught from birth. That's remarkable. In fact, if somebody were to ask me, prove to me that real love works, I would say, go talk to any of my grandkids. Really. They are proof that it works. Children who feel loved don't do addictions to substances and behaviors, aren't angry, don't tease each other, don't complain, whine, aren't entitled. They're just not. Because they're happy. Not because they're told not to do those other things, but because happiness is the ultimate reward. So I'm going to share with you a couple of stories. I might go crazy and do 3. My daughter, one of them, saw that her daughters, she has 2 daughters and a son. They are her daughters, but more importantly, they're my grandchildren, of course. Sylvie, age 9, and Bonnie, age 6, were playing with mom's hair clips. My daughter said, quote, to the 2 girls, "Those are my expensive hair clips. Yours are in the bathroom." Now, notice she didn't say, stop that, or no, just those are my clips. Yours are in the bathroom. Love and teach. It's a great example of loving and teaching. Now, my daughter was telling the story to me, and she added to me parenthetically, yeah, I know I didn't make it a clear request. I didn't say I would prefer that you go play with yours in the other room. She usually does make clear requests with the kids because they simply work better. But here, she just stated a fact. Those are mine. Yours are in the other room. And she figured that they would conclude, well, then we'll go play with ours in the other room. Sylvie, 9, says, "Thanks for telling us that, Mom, so that we can put them back before we lose any." You got to hear that, right? To get how hysterical and precious that is. She didn't even consider the possibility that her mother was hinting, because normally her mother doesn't hint. If she wants something, she just says it. Please go do this. She didn't even consider the fact that her mother might be hinting that Sylvie and Bonnie not use the hair clips at all. Didn't even think about that. She heard only, oh, well, those are your expensive clips, so we will be extra careful with them, and we will put them back and not lose them. Tickles me to death. That could only happen not if mom or the daughter read a list of 5 ways to get your stuff put back in the right place. That would never work. The technique alone would never work. It would only happen if Sylvie had been certain of 2 things. 1, her mother's love, so she didn't take it as a criticism or a threat or anything. And that she felt her mother's trust of her. So she just made the assumption, because she didn't hear a request, that her mother trusted her, and she was just saying, take care of my expensive hair clips. Priceless. This is how children behave when they feel loved. Next story, Bruce. same family, was in his room reading, and Bonnie, his sister, 6, was pestering him. Now, I say pestering, not intentionally pestering, but she was just being 6. And she was asking him questions and asking that he play with her. He's reading. And she's going, I don't care. I want you to play with me. So she was pestering him in that way. She just was being 6 years old. And Bruce said, not the usual, like kids do, hey, stop it, Mom! Yeah, you've all heard it. Bruce said, Bonnie, I would like to be alone. And Bonnie said, okay, and walks out and softly closes the door. As she's closing the door, Bruce says, thanks, Bonnie. I don't know any adults who behave that well. I don't know adults who would just simply say, this is what I would prefer to do, because then the other adult will say, well, but I like to do this. But wouldn't you like to do this? But wouldn't you? Now that's pestering. No, Bruce, just calm as could be, said, I'd like to be alone. And his sister went, well, gosh, if you'd like that, then why shouldn't you have it at 6? And left. Because they were properly trained? Because they learned the 5 steps to not fight? Oh no, because they both feel loved and happy. That's all. And you get to ask for what you want. Stunning. And you've all heard it the other way. Stop bothering me. I'm not bothering you. You're ignoring me. And on and on. And children who feel loved don't behave with irritation, teasing, yelling, whining, and all the stuff that we've all heard many times, whether we're isolated at home with a virus or not. Last story. But that I got like moments ago. I had to insert it here to remember it even. My daughter says, another thing that I heard when the kids were playing a board game today. One child said, doesn't matter which one, looks like you're going to win. The other child said, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It only matters if you're happy. I'll tell you, when I was a child, it mattered if you won. It doesn't matter. It only matters if you're happy. And then another one said, oh, and if you're wrong. Now, you'd have to understand loving and teaching first to understand what that means. Meaning, it matters that if you're wrong, you admit being wrong instead of blaming somebody else, and you admit being wrong so that you can feel loved while you're wrong. That's what the child meant when they said, and if you're wrong. They don't all walk around going, let's be wrong, or let's find out how somebody else is wrong. And then the final child concluded with, oh, yeah, and it matters if you're kind. It just takes my breath away. No kidding. Looks like you're going to win. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It matters if you're happy. And if you can admit you're wrong. And if you're kind. I wish I'd been able to teach my children that well. New subject. You'll notice that in these recordings of Facebook Live, I sometimes answer people's questions by suggesting what they could do. Sometimes I even say, do this. Now, as a rule, I don't tell people what to do. I don't want that responsibility. I'm not interested in controlling people. I'm not interested in it. I don't keep myself from doing it. I just don't care to. I got plenty to do in controlling my own behavior. But if somebody says to me, what I've been doing with my kid or kids in the following circumstances, and they describe something that's happening, works horribly. And I wonder if you have a better idea. This is the parent talking to me. Would you be willing to share it with me? Well, then, sure, I'm happy to share my ideas, thoughts, and extensive experience with people, extensive experience with things that work. But I have absolutely no interest in controlling them. One thing I can do consistently is tell you what works, and I'll share that. But I won't tell you what you should do. I just don't use that word, except to say, not a useful word. Just what works. You can do, and I kind of led into this earlier in this conversation, what I do with you, you will discover will work if you do it with your kids. I'm modeling for you how to do it. So I don't try to control people. I tell people what works better. You can do the same with your kids. That's what my daughter did with those 3 kids that I just described. She didn't tell them that they should anything. She said, when a child was fighting with another child, you don't look very happy. And you'll learn tons about this in the realloveparents.com website. You don't look very happy. Well, and the child clearly not happy because they're fighting with their sibling. So what would work better than what you're doing? And that's how she taught them. She taught them what works. That's what will work for you. If you teach your children what works in the school of life, not what you want. Because if you simply tell your kids, I want you to do this, what do they learn? All they learn is what you want and that you're bigger and you can make them. That is not a useful life lesson. It might make you feel good for a minute. You want to teach your children principles, not your preferences or how you control them. If I care about you, how could I not share what I know that leads to greater happiness for you and your children? That's why I'm doing this. That's why we're doing this free Facebook Live for as many weeks as it takes, because we genuinely care about you, and it's expensive to do it. We care that you know how to teach your children to feel loved, to be loving, and be responsible. We're not here to tell you what to do. I'm not anybody's boss. I feel good on a day when I manage to control my own decisions. So that's what we do on every one of these. I love and teach you and do it in a way that you might be able to, with practice, replicate as you love and teach your own children. That's the pattern. Not complicated. We'll see you tomorrow.